The rain poured down relentlessly on the muddy streets of Promise Creek, Wyoming Territory, as Isaac Turner pulled his hat lower over his eyes, the lone silhouette of a man against the angry gray skies when he spotted a woman in a sodden blue dress huddled beneath the meager shelter of the Stagecoach Depot's awning, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to match the rhythm of the falling rain. Beauty in the Rain, Chapter 1. The woman at the depot. Isaac Turner had seen many things in his 32 years on the frontier: cattle stampedes, gunfights, gold rushes, and even a tornado that had nearly swept him clean off the prairie. But the sight of the woman crying alone in the downpour stopped him cold in his tracks. It was October 1875, and Promise Creek was barely more than a collection of wooden buildings clinging to existence between the vast Wyoming grasslands and the looming mountains beyond. "Madam," he called out, approaching slowly so as not to startle her, "are you in need of assistance?" The woman's head jerked up, revealing a face streaked with tears and rain. Her brown hair had come loose from its pins and hung in damp tendrils around her shoulders. Her eyes, wide with surprise and something akin to fear, were a striking hazel that caught Isaac off guard. She tried to speak but choked on a sob instead. She clutched a battered carpetbag to her chest like it contained her last worldly possessions, which Isaac suspected it might well have. "You'll catch your death out here," he said, stepping closer and offering the shelter of his duster coat. "There's a cafe just down the way that makes a decent cup of coffee. Might warm you up some." Her gaze turned wary. "I don't need charity, sir." Isaac noted the Eastern accent in her voice. "Not offering charity, madam. Just coffee and maybe a place to dry off while this squall passes." For a moment he thought she might refuse, but another powerful shiver seemed to make the decision for her. With a small nod, she stood, revealing herself to be taller than he'd first thought, though still a good head shorter than his 6-foot frame. "I'm Isaac Turner," he said, tipping his hat. "Own a cattle ranch about 10 miles outside of town." "Lillian O'Brien," she replied, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. As they walked the short distance to Mabel's cafe, Isaac noticed how the few townsfolk out in the weather cast curious glances their way. Promise Creek wasn't large enough for strangers to pass unnoticed, and a bedraggled Eastern woman accompanied by one of the area's ranchers was bound to set tongues wagging. The cafe was mercifully warm, the pot-bellied stove in the corner radiating heat that felt like salvation after the chill of the rain. The proprietress, a stout woman with gray-streaked hair coiled in a practical bun, raised an eyebrow at their waterlogged appearance but said nothing as Isaac led Lillian to a table near the stove. "2 coffees, Mabel," he called, "and whatever's warm from the kitchen." Only after Lillian had wrapped her slender fingers around the steaming mug and taken a few sips did color begin to return to her pale face. Isaac waited patiently, knowing from experience that some stories needed coaxing while others would come in their own time. "I was supposed to be married today," she finally said, eyes fixed on the dark liquid in her cup. Isaac felt a strange twist in his gut. "I see." "No, you don't," Lillian said with unexpected sharpness. "I was a mail-order bride, came all the way from Boston to marry a man I'd never met. Franklin Bosworth. He owns the Mercantile here, I'm told." Isaac knew Bosworth, a successful businessman who'd arrived in Promise Creek 3 years earlier, pompous sort who fancied himself above the common folk of the territory. "And?" Isaac prompted when she fell silent. Lillian's lips twisted in a bitter smile that held no humor. "And he took one look at me and decided I wasn't what he'd ordered." Her voice cracked. "Said I wasn't pretty enough to be seen on his arm, that I'd misrepresented myself in my letters." She swallowed hard. "He paid the stagecoach driver to take me back to Cheyenne on tomorrow's run." White-hot anger flashed through Isaac. "He what?" They sent me back for being ugly, she whispered, the words falling between them like stones. Isaac stared at her, genuinely confused. The woman before him was certainly no conventional beauty like those painted ladies in the saloon with their powdered faces and bright dresses. Her features were strong rather than delicate, a straight nose, determined chin, and those remarkable hazel eyes. But ugly was about the last word he'd used to describe her. "Bosworth's a damn fool," he said before he could stop himself. Lillian looked up, startled by his vehemence. "Begging your pardon for the language," Isaac added, "but it's the truth nonetheless." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Thank you for the sentiment, Mr. Turner, but kind words don't change my situation. I've spent nearly every penny I had on the journey here. I can't afford passage back to Boston, even if I had anything to return to, which I don't." Isaac considered her words as Mabel arrived with 2 plates of steaming stew and a basket of biscuits still warm from the oven. The cafe owner gave Lillian an appraising look before nodding slightly to Isaac and returning to the kitchen. "What did you leave behind in Boston?" he asked after they'd eaten in silence for a few minutes. Lillian sighed. "Nothing worth mentioning. My parents died of influenza 3 years ago. I've been working as a seamstress and living in a boarding house for respectable, unmarried women. When I saw Mr. Bosworth's advertisement seeking a practical, educated woman of good character to be wife to a successful businessman in the Wyoming Territory, it seemed like Providence." She laughed without humor. "Clearly, I was mistaken." Isaac watched her as she spoke, noting the way she held herself spine straight despite her obvious distress, shoulders squared as if bracing for the next blow life might deliver. This was no fragile hothouse flower, despite her Eastern origins. "You say you're a seamstress?" he asked. She nodded. "I am. A good one. Promise Creek's growing. Town's got almost 500 souls now, and the nearest dressmaker is in Cheyenne. A skilled seamstress might find plenty of work here." Hope flickered across her face before dying. "Perhaps, but I have nowhere to stay and a woman alone." She left the sentence unfinished, but Isaac understood. The frontier was unforgiving for unaccompanied women. "My sister runs a boarding house," he said. "Nothing fancy, but clean and respectable. She might have a room available." Lillian's expression turned guarded. "I told you, Mr. Turner, I won't accept charity." "And I don't recall offering any," he replied evenly. "Sarah charges fair rates, and if you're as good with a needle as you claim, you could work out an arrangement. She's always complaining about mending that needs doing." For the first time since he'd found her at the depot, Lillian O'Brien looked at him with an expression that wasn't clouded by despair. Her hazel eyes seemed to take his measure, and Isaac found himself hoping he wouldn't be found wanting. "Why would you help a stranger, Mr. Turner?" It was a fair question, and one Isaac wasn't entirely sure he could answer. He shrugged his broad shoulders. "Out here, strangers are just neighbors you haven't met yet. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "seems to me that any woman willing to travel 2,000 miles to start a new life has more grit than most. Would be ashamed to see that go to waste because of a fool like Bosworth." Lillian considered his words, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Mr. Turner. I would be grateful for an introduction to your sister." "Isaac," he said, "if we're to be neighbors, you might as well use my given name." "Isaac," she repeated, and the sound of his name on her lips caused a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the stove or the coffee. "And you're Lillian, Lily," she corrected. "I've always been Lily to those who—" She hesitated. "To those who know me." "Well then, Lily," Isaac said, standing and offering his hand. "Let's see about finding you a place in Promise Creek." The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle by the time they stepped back outside. As they walked toward Sarah Turner's boarding house, Isaac found himself stealing glances at the woman beside him. Each time, he became more convinced that Franklin Bosworth might just be the biggest fool in the Wyoming Territory. Chapter 2. A place to stay. Sarah Turner's boarding house stood on the eastern edge of Promise Creek, a two-story clapboard structure painted a cheerful yellow with white trim. A wide porch wrapped around the front, dotted with rocking chairs where, in better weather, the residents could enjoy the view of the distant mountains. At 35, Sarah was Isaac's elder by 3 years and had been running the boarding house since her husband died in a mining accident 5 years earlier. She greeted them at the door, her expression shifting from pleasure at seeing her brother to curiosity about his companion. "Isaac, what brings you to town in this weather?" Her shrewd blue eyes, so like her brother's, took in Lily's damp appearance and the carpetbag clutched in her hand. "Sarah, this is Miss Lillian O'Brien. She's new to Promise Creek and in need of lodging," Isaac explained. "Lily, my sister, Sarah Matthews." Sarah's welcoming smile never wavered, though Isaac knew her well enough to see the questions in her eyes. "Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Miss O'Brien. You're in luck. I've a small room available on the second floor. Nothing grand, but it's clean and has a fine view of the sunrise." "That sounds lovely, Mrs. Matthews," Lily said, "but I should be forthright. My funds are limited at present." Sarah waved a hand dismissively. "Isaac mentioned you're a seamstress." "Yes, madam." "Then we can work something out. I've got plenty of mending that needs doing, and several of my boarders would likely pay for alterations and repairs." She glanced at Lily's carpetbag. "Is that all your belongings?" Lily nodded, a flush of embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I traveled light." "Sensible," Sarah pronounced. "No point hauling trunks across the country. Come along, I'll show you to your room and then perhaps you join us for supper. We eat at 6 sharp." As Sarah led Lily upstairs, Isaac found himself standing awkwardly in the entryway, hat in hand, uncertain why he was reluctant to leave. He'd done what he'd set out to do, found the woman a safe place to stay. His ranch was waiting, with 100 tasks that needed his attention. Yet he lingered. Sarah returned a few minutes later, arms crossed and one eyebrow raised in a look Isaac had known since childhood. It usually preceded a lecture. "Franklin Bosworth's mail-order bride?" she asked without preamble. Isaac sighed. "News travels fast." "It's Promise Creek, Isaac. I knew he was expecting her on today's stage. Half the town's been talking about it for weeks." She frowned. "What happened?" "The man's a jackass," Isaac growled. "Took one look at her and decided she wasn't pretty enough to be his wife. Told her he was sending her back to Cheyenne tomorrow." Sarah's expression hardened. "That heartless," she caught herself. "Well, his loss may be Promise Creek's gain. We could use a skilled seamstress." She studied her brother's face. "Though I suspect your interest isn't solely in the town's need for tailoring services." "I found her crying in the rain, Sarah," Isaac said defensively. "What was I supposed to do? Leave her there? Of course not." "You did right by her, bringing her here." Sarah's expression softened. "She seems a sensible sort. Strong too, I'd wager, despite today's setback." "She is," Isaac agreed, perhaps too quickly based on Sarah's knowing smile. "Well, brother, I suspect this isn't the last we'll be seeing of you in town." Isaac put his hat back on, tugging the brim down. "I've got business in Promise Creek regularly enough." "MMHMM," Sarah hummed skeptically. "More regularly now, I'd imagine." Isaac chose to ignore this. "You'll look after her. Make sure Bosworth doesn't cause any more trouble." "I'll keep an eye on her," Sarah promised. "Though from what little I've seen, Miss O'Brien might be more capable than you give her credit for." With a nod of agreement, Isaac took his leave, mounting his gelding for the ride back to his ranch. As he left town, He couldn't resist glancing back at the yellow boarding house, wondering which window belonged to the room where Lily O'Brien was settling in. A sensible man would put the woman from his mind. Isaac had a ranch to run, cattle to tend, and men to manage. He had no business thinking about a woman he'd just met, especially one still reeling from rejection. Yet as he rode through the steadily clearing skies toward home, Isaac found his thoughts returning again and again to hazel eyes and a determined chin, to the woman who had traveled 2,000 miles seeking a new beginning only to find heartbreak instead. "Bosworth's a damn fool," he muttered again to his horse, who flicked an ear back in seeming agreement. Isaac hadn't been looking for any complications in his life, but something told him that Lillian O'Brien might just be a complication worth having. Chapter 3. New beginnings. Lily spent her first night in Sarah Matthews' boarding house, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the building as it settled. Her small room was indeed clean and comfortable, furnished simply with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand, and a rocking chair positioned near the window. A braided rug softened the wooden floor, and curtains that matched the quilt on the bed framed the window that, as promised, faced east toward the mountains. Despite the comfort of her surroundings, sleep eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Franklin Bosworth's face the way his expression had shifted from anticipation to disappointment when she'd stepped off the stagecoach. "This can't be right," he'd said, looking past her as if expecting another woman to appear. "Where is Miss O'Brien?" "I am Lillian O'Brien, sir," she'd replied, extending her hand. He'd barely touched her fingers before dropping them. "But you're not. That is to say, you don't look like. Your letters suggested a woman of more pleasing appearance." The memory still burned. Lily had never claimed to be a great beauty. Her letters had been honest, describing herself as tall for a woman with brown hair and hazel eyes. She'd emphasized her practical skills, her sewing, cooking, and household management, rather than any physical attributes. Sighing, Lily turned over, punching her pillow into a more comfortable shape. Perhaps it was for the best. A man who would reject a wife based solely on her appearance was not likely to make a good husband. Still, the humiliation stung deeply, as did the realization that she was now stranded in a frontier town with few resources and no clear path forward, except Isaac Turner's face floated in her mind's eye. His kindness had been unexpected, a warm light in the darkness of the worst day of her life. He was not at all what she'd imagined a Wyoming cattleman would be. Oh, he looked the part well enough, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-browned skin and calloused hands that spoke of hard physical labor. His face was weathered by years under the open sky, laugh lines crinkling at the corners of eyes as blue as a summer sky. But it was his gentleness that had surprised her. The way he'd spoken to her without pity or condescension. The respect in his voice when he'd referred to her skills. "This is foolishness," Lily whispered to herself in the darkness. The man was simply being neighborly, as he said. Yet she couldn't help but remember the anger in his voice when she'd told him what Bosworth had done, or the way his eyes had widened slightly when she'd asked him to call her Lily. As if the invitation to use her familiar name had been some sort of gift. Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through her window, just as Sarah had promised. Lily rose, washed her face in the basin provided, and dressed in one of her few remaining clean dresses, a serviceable gray cotton with white collar and cuffs. She pinned her hair neatly and made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bacon. The boarding house dining room was already occupied by several other residents, two elderly sisters who taught at the town school, a middle-aged man who worked at the sawmill, and a young woman who, Sarah explained, was the telegraph operator. All greeted Lily with varying degrees of curiosity and warmth. "I've told everyone about your sewing skills," Sarah said as she served a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. "Miss Perkins already has a dress she'd like altered, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned her brother needs new shirts." Lily felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Mrs. Matthews. I'd be happy to take on any work available." "Sarah, please," the older woman insisted. "We don't stand on ceremony here." By midday, Lily had set up a small workspace in her room using the rickety table Sarah provided. Her scissors, needles, pins, and measuring tape, the tools of her trade that she'd carefully packed in her carpet bag, were arranged neatly alongside fabric samples she'd brought from Boston. A knock at her door revealed Sarah with an armload of mending. "To start with," she said, depositing the pile on the bed. "Nothing urgent, but if you could see to these when you have time, it would be a great help." "Of course," Lily agreed. "And about my room and board, we'll settle accounts at the end of the week," Sarah interrupted. "Once we see how much work comes your way. Now, I've told a few ladies in town about you, and I wouldn't be surprised if you had visitors this afternoon." Sarah's prediction proved accurate. By late afternoon, Lily had received visits from the wives of the town doctor, the blacksmith, and the banker, all ostensibly interested in her services but clearly curious about the mail-order bride who'd been rejected by Franklin Bosworth. Lily maintained her dignity throughout, discussing fabrics and styles while deflecting personal questions with practiced politeness. Her last visitor of the day, however, was not a potential customer, but Isaac Turner himself. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said when Sarah showed him to Lily's door, which she'd left ajar while working. He stood awkwardly in the hallway, hat in hand, looking somehow too large for the narrow corridor. "Not at all," Lily replied, setting aside the shirt she was mending. "Please come in." Isaac stepped into the small room, seeming to fill it with his presence. He glanced around, taking in her modest workspace. "You're getting settled, then?" "Yes, thanks to you and your sister's kindness." Lily gestured to the chair by the window, the only seating available besides the bed. "Please sit." He did so, placing his hat on his knee. "I was in town for supplies and thought I'd check on how you were faring." "That's very thoughtful of you." Lily found herself smoothing her skirts nervously. "I've had several potential customers already." "It seems Promise Creek has been in need of a seamstress." "Told you as much," Isaac said with a small smile. "Folks here make do with ordering from catalogs or traveling to Cheyenne, but having someone local will be welcomed." A moment of silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable but laden with unspoken words. "I heard Bosworth's been telling folks you changed your mind about marrying him," Isaac finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Says you decided frontier life wasn't to your liking after all." Lily's hands clenched in her lap. "Of course he would say that. Nobody who's met you believes it," Isaac added quickly. "Man's never been known for his honesty." "It doesn't matter," Lily said, though the lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "What's done is done. I'm focused on building a new life here now." Isaac studied her face. "You're an unusual woman, Lily O'Brien." The unexpected comment startled a laugh from her. "I'm not sure if that's a compliment." "It is," he assured her. "Most folks would be wallowing after what happened to you yesterday. But here you are, already making plans, taking in work." "What would be the point in wallowing?" Lily asked pragmatically. "It wouldn't change anything, and I've never had the luxury of self-pity." Isaac nodded as if she'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "I admire that." He hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you might like to see a bit of Promise Creek on Sunday after church. Weather's supposed to be fair, and it might do you good to get acquainted with the town if you're planning to stay." Lily was caught off guard by the invitation. "Are you? Is this?" She struggled to find the right words. "Just neighborly," Isaac said quickly, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. "As I said yesterday, strangers are just neighbors you haven't met yet." Lily found herself smiling. "Then I would be pleased to accept your neighborly offer, Mr. Turner." "Isaac," he reminded her. "Isaac," she acknowledged. He stood, seeming relieved. "Good, that's good. I'll call for you after the service then." After he'd gone, Lily returned to her mending, but her mind kept wandering to the coming Sunday. It wasn't a courtship, she reminded herself firmly. Just a kind man helping a newcomer acclimate to her surroundings. Yet a small, hopeful part of her heart, a part she'd thought had withered away during the long, lonely years in Boston, wondered if perhaps it might become something more. Chapter 4. Sunday outing. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, the October air carrying the first hint of the winter to come. Lily dressed with particular care in her best dress, a deep blue wool with subtle embroidery at the collar that she'd made herself. She pinned her hair into a neat chignon and donned her only hat, a modest affair adorned with a single blue ribbon that matched her dress. Church in Promise Creek was a simple affair compared to the grand cathedrals of Boston. The white clapboard building with its modest steeple stood at the center of town, its doors thrown wide to welcome the faithful. Lily entered alone, conscious of the curious glances directed her way, and slipped into a pew near the back. She spotted Isaac across the church, sitting with a younger man who bore enough resemblance to be clearly related. He caught her eye and nodded in greeting, the gesture sending an unexpected flutter through her chest. The service passed in a blur of unfamiliar hymns and a sermon about perseverance that seemed oddly appropriate to Lily's situation. When it ended, she remained seated as the congregation filed out, preferring to wait until the initial crush had passed. "Miss O'Brien." A cultured voice interrupted her thoughts. Lily looked up to find herself face to face with Franklin Bosworth. Dressed in an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the frontier church, he cut an impressive figure handsome in a conventional way, with carefully pomaded hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. His expression was one of practiced concern. "Mr. Bosworth," Lily acknowledged coolly, rising to her feet. "I heard you'd remained in town," he said, lowering his voice. "I must say I'm surprised. I thought we had an understanding." "Did we?" Lily kept her voice level despite the anger building within her. "I understood I was to be your wife." "You understood I was to be ornamental. It seems we misunderstood each other entirely." Bosworth's face tightened. "There's no need for unpleasantness. I've paid for your return passage to Cheyenne. The stage leaves tomorrow morning." "I won't be on it," Lily informed him. "I've found employment here in Promise Creek." "As a seamstress." Bosworth's tone made it clear what he thought of such work. "That's hardly appropriate. A woman in your position, my position is no longer your concern, Mr. Bosworth," Lily interrupted, aware that their conversation was drawing attention. "Is there a problem here?" Isaac's deep voice came from behind Bosworth, who turned with evident annoyance. "This is a private conversation, Turner," Bosworth said dismissively. "Not anymore it isn't," Isaac replied, his usual easy manner replaced with something harder. "Miss O'Brien agreed to accompany me today, and we've got places to be." Bosworth looked between them, understanding dawning on his face. "I see. Well, that was quick work, Turner. I didn't take you for the type to pick up another man's leavings." The words had barely left his mouth when Isaac stepped forward, looming over the shorter man. "You might want to reconsider those words, Bosworth," he said quietly, but with an edge that made the merchant take an involuntary step back. "Gentlemen, please," Lily interjected, keenly aware of the spectacle they were creating. "Mr. Bosworth, I wish you well, but our business is concluded." "Isaac, shall we go?" Isaac offered his arm, which Lily took gratefully, allowing him to escort her from the church. She could feel Bosworth's gaze boring into her back but refused to give him the satisfaction of looking back. "I apologize for that," Isaac said once they were outside. "Man's got no manners to speak of." "It's not your fault," Lily assured him, "though I fear I've now given the good people of Promise Creek even more to gossip about." Isaac chuckled, his good humor returning. They'd find something to talk about regardless. Small towns run on gossip like engines run on coal. He patted her hand where it rested on his arm. "Don't fret about it. They'll find a new topic soon enough." The young man Lily had seen sitting with Isaac in church approached them, grinning widely. "Aren't you going to introduce me to the lady, Isaac?" Isaac rolled his eyes but smiled fondly. "Lily, this is my younger brother Jacob. Jake, Miss Lillian O'Brien." Jacob Turner had the same blue eyes as his siblings but lacked the weathered look that years on the range had given Isaac. He couldn't be more than 25, Lily guessed, with an open, friendly face that immediately put her at ease. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss O'Brien," Jacob said, tipping his hat. "Heard you're a seamstress. Any chance you make men's shirts?" "The ones in the mercantile never fit right across the shoulders." "I'd be happy to make you shirts that fit properly, Mr. Turner," Lily replied, charmed by his straightforward manner. "Jake's foreman at my ranch," Isaac explained, "when he's not pestering newcomers for tailoring services." "Not pestering, negotiating," Jacob corrected with a wink. "I'll stop by the boarding house this week with fabric, if that's amenable, of course," Lily agreed. After Jacob took his leave, Isaac guided Lily toward a small wagon hitched nearby. "Hope you don't mind riding in this." "It's not fancy, but it's comfortable enough." "It's perfect," Lily assured him as he helped her up to the seat. Their tour of Promise Creek was both informative and enjoyable. Isaac pointed out the important landmarks: the school, the sheriff's office, the bank, and the various businesses that served the community's needs. They stopped at several points so Lily could stretch her legs and meet some of the townspeople, many of whom greeted her warmly once they learned of her profession. "There's a spot just outside town I'd like to show you," Isaac said as they finished their circuit of Promise Creek. "If you're not too tired." "Not at all," Lily replied truthfully. Despite the emotional strain of the past few days, she found herself energized by Isaac's company and the friendly reception from most of the townsfolk. He directed the wagon east, following a winding trail that led toward the foothills. After about 15 minutes, they crested a small rise, and Isaac drew the horses to a halt. "This is my favorite view of Promise Creek," he said. Lily gasped softly. From their vantage point, they could see the entire settlement spread out below them, with the vast prairie stretching beyond it to the west, and the majestic mountains rising to the east. The afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, making the humble collection of buildings look almost magical. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Most folks only see the dust and the roughness," Isaac said, his voice thoughtful. "They miss the beauty that's here if you know where to look." Something in his tone made Lily glance at him, only to find him already watching her, his blue eyes intent. A blush heated her cheeks under his gaze. "I brought a simple lunch," he said, changing the subject as he reached behind the seat for a basket. "Nothing special, just some bread, cheese, and apples. Thought we might eat here before heading back." They spread a blanket on the ground and shared the simple meal, talking easily about inconsequential things: the history of Promise Creek, Lily's first impressions of Wyoming, the upcoming cattle drive Isaac was planning. Lily found herself relaxing in his company, laughing more than she had in years. "You have a beautiful laugh," Isaac observed during a lull in the conversation. "You should use it more often." Lily looked down, flustered by the compliment. "I haven't had much cause for laughter lately." "No, I don't suppose you have." Isaac's voice was gentle. "For what it's worth, I think Bosworth made the biggest mistake of his life." "You don't need to say that," Lily said, though his words warmed her. "I'm not just saying it." Isaac's gaze was steady. "You're worth 10 of him, Lily O'Brien." Any man with eyes in his head could see that. The sincerity in his voice made something inside Lily's chest tighten. "Thank you," she said softly, unable to find more adequate words. They packed up the remains of their lunch as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The ride back to town was quieter, a comfortable silence settling between them. When they reached the boarding house, Isaac helped Lily down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Thank you for today," Lily said, reluctant for their time together to end. "I enjoyed seeing Promise Creek through your eyes." "The pleasure was mine," Isaac replied. He hesitated, then added, "I'll be in town again on Thursday for supplies. Perhaps we could have dinner at the cafe." Lily knew she should be cautious. She'd come to Wyoming to marry one man and now, less than a week later, was considering dining with another. But Isaac Turner was nothing like Franklin Bosworth, and her heart, which had been so battered by recent events, seemed eager to trust again. "I'd like that," she said. Isaac's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Thursday, then. 6 o'clock." 6 o'clock, Lily confirmed. She watched him drive away, his broad-shouldered silhouette straight and sure on the wagon seat. Only when he turned the corner and disappeared from view did she go inside, aware of Sarah's curious gaze following her up the stairs. In the privacy of her room, Lily sat on the edge of her bed, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling within her. She'd come to Promise Creek seeking security and companionship, willing to marry a stranger to find it. That plan had failed spectacularly, yet here she was, possibly on the brink of something she hadn't dared hope for, a relationship based not on practical arrangements but on genuine affection. "Don't be a fool, Lily," she whispered to herself. It was just one afternoon. But as she prepared for bed that night, she couldn't help but remember the way Isaac had looked at her on that hillside, as if he was seeing something precious that others had overlooked. For the first time since arriving in Promise Creek, Lily fell asleep with a smile on her face. Chapter 5. The dinner the days leading up to Thursday passed in a blur of activity for Lily. Word of her sewing skills had spread quickly through Promise Creek, bringing a steady stream of customers to her door. By Wednesday evening, she had completed alterations on 3 dresses, repaired a pile of mending for Sarah, and taken measurements for 2 new shirts for Jacob Turner and a wedding dress for the blacksmith's daughter. The work was a blessing, keeping her hands busy and her mind occupied during the day. But in the quiet evenings, as she sat by her window with needle and thread, her thoughts inevitably turned to Isaac Turner. Their Sunday outing had left her both hopeful and wary. The connection between them seemed undeniable, yet Lily couldn't help but question its foundation. Was Isaac truly interested in her? Or was his attention merely a reaction to Bosworth's rejection, a kind man's attempt to salvage a wounded woman's pride? Thursday morning dawned bright and clear. Lily rose early, completed her morning chores, and spent the day working on Jacob's shirts, trying not to watch the clock as the hours crept toward evening. At 4, she set aside her sewing and began preparing for dinner, washing with the rose-scented soap she'd brought from Boston and dressing in her second-best dress, a deep green wool that complemented her hazel eyes. Sarah knocked on her door just as Lily was pinning the last strands of her hair into a neat arrangement. "You look lovely," she said, leaning against the doorframe. Green suits you. Thank you, Lily replied, smoothing a hand over her skirt. Is it too much for a simple dinner at the cafe? Sarah's eyes twinkled. Not for the impression you're hoping to make on my brother. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. I'm not, oh, don't fret, Sarah interrupted with a laugh. I think it's wonderful. Isaac has been alone too long, burying himself in that ranch of his since Mary died. Lily froze in the act of adjusting her collar. Mary, Sarah's expression shifted to one of dismay. He hasn't mentioned her. Oh dear, I thought surely he would have by now. Who is Mary? Lily asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Sarah sighed. Was not is. Mary was Isaac's wife. She died 7 years ago in childbirth along with their infant son. The news hit Lily like a physical blow. I had no idea he was a widower. Isaac doesn't speak of it often, Sarah said gently, but I thought you should know. It shaped him, that loss. Made him cautious with his heart. She reached out to touch Lily's arm. The fact that he's showing interest in you at all is significant, Lily. Isaac doesn't do anything lightly. Lily nodded, absorbing this new information. It explained something about the shadow she'd occasionally glimpsed behind Isaac's smile, the careful way he seemed to hold part of himself in reserve. Thank you for telling me, she said finally. I'll be mindful. Sarah squeezed her arm. Just be yourself. That seems to be working well enough so far. With a reassuring smile, she left Lily to her thoughts. At precisely 6 o'clock, Lily descended the stairs to find Isaac waiting in the boarding house parlor, hat in hand, freshly shaved and dressed in clean clothes that, while still practical, were clearly his best. The sight of him tall and solid and real settled some of the anxiety that had been building in her since Sarah's revelation. You look beautiful, he said simply, his blue eyes warm with admiration. Thank you, Lily replied, accepting his offered arm. You look quite handsome yourself. The walk to Mabel's cafe was brief but pleasant, the early evening air crisp with the promise of autumn. Inside, the cafe was busy with the dinner crowd, but a table near the window had been reserved for them, a small vase containing a single wildflower placed at its center. You're doing? Lily asked, gesturing to the flower as they sat down. Isaac's ears reddened slightly. Thought it might brighten the table, last of the season, according to Mabel's daughter who picked it. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Lily deeply. They ordered their meals: roast beef with potatoes and vegetables for Isaac, chicken and dumplings for Lily, and settled into conversation that flowed as easily as it had during their Sunday outing. It wasn't until after their plates had been cleared and coffee served that Lily found the courage to broach the subject of Isaac's past. Sarah mentioned something to me today, she began carefully, about your wife, Mary. Isaac's expression stilled, a flicker of old pain crossing his features before he nodded. I should have told you myself. I'm sorry. There's no need to apologize, Lily said quickly. I wanted you to know that I know and that I'm sorry for your loss. Isaac was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his large hands. It was a long time ago, he said finally. 7 years this past spring. Mary was. She was a good woman. We were happy together. He looked up, meeting Lily's eyes. I don't talk about her much, not because I want to forget, but because folks get uncomfortable when I do. They either change the subject or get that pitying look I can't abide. I understand, Lily said softly. After my parents died, people stopped mentioning them around me, as if saying their names might shatter me. But sometimes I wanted to talk about them, to remember them out loud. Isaac's expression lightened with recognition. Exactly that. Mary wasn't a sad secret to be kept. She was my wife and I loved her. The loss was terrible, but the loving wasn't. The simple honesty of his words moved Lily deeply. "Tell me about her," she asked, "if you'd like to." For a moment, Isaac looked surprised, then grateful. "She was a school teacher before we married. Came out from Illinois to teach at the Promise Creek School. Had the most infectious laugh you ever heard and couldn't cook worth a damn, though she tried." His smile was tender with memory. "She loved books. Our cabin was full of them and spring wildflowers, and those hard peppermint candies from the mercantile." As he spoke, Lily could see the woman taking shape in her mind, vibrant, intelligent, beloved. Not a ghost to be feared or a rival to be measured against, but a person who had helped make Isaac the man he was today. "She sounds wonderful," Lily said when he fell silent. "She was," Isaac agreed. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers tentatively. "But that chapter of my life ended 7 years ago, Lily. I'm ready to write a new one." The implication of his words hung between them, a delicate bridge neither was quite ready to cross fully. Lily turned her hand, allowing his fingers to intertwine with hers. "I think," she said carefully, "that I might be ready for a new chapter as well." Isaac's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual and then suddenly radiant. "Good," he said simply. "That's good." They lingered over their coffee until Mabel began giving them pointed looks as she wiped down nearby tables. The walk back to the boarding house seemed both too short and endless, their conversation lighter now, but underlaid with a new awareness of each other. At the boarding house steps, Isaac took both of Lily's hands in his. "I've got to head back to the ranch tonight. We're moving cattle to the winter pastures tomorrow, but I'd like to call on you again if I may." "I'd like that," Lily replied, her heart racing at his proximity. Isaac hesitated, then leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wished. When she didn't, he pressed a gentle kiss to her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Lily O'Brien," he murmured. "Good night, Isaac," she replied, breathless. She watched him walk away, his stride long and confident in the gathering darkness. Only when he disappeared from view did she touch her fingers to the spot where his lips had been, a smile curving her mouth. Inside, Sarah was waiting in the parlor, pretending to read but clearly eager for details. "Good evening," she asked innocently. "Yes," Lily replied, unable to keep the happiness from her voice. "A very good evening." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Lily reflected on the strange path that had led her to this moment. A month ago, she had been in Boston, packing her meager belongings to travel across the country to marry a man she'd never met. Now here she was, possibly falling for a different man entirely, one who saw her clearly and seemed to like what he saw. Perhaps rejection could sometimes be a blessing in disguise, Lily thought as she prepared for bed. Perhaps what had seemed like an ending was actually a beginning. Chapter 6. The storm October gave way to November, bringing shorter days and the threat of winter to Promise Creek. Lily's sewing business flourished as the townspeople prepared for the colder months ahead, ordering warm clothing and bringing winter garments out of storage for alterations and repairs. The initial gossip about her situation had largely died down, replaced by genuine appreciation for her skills with needle and thread. Her relationship with Isaac developed gradually but steadily. Whenever his ranch duties brought him to town, which seemed to be increasingly often, he made time to see her. Sometimes they simply shared a meal at the cafe. Other times they took walks along the creek that gave the town its name. Occasionally, when his business required a full day in town, they'd ride out to the spot he'd shown her that first Sunday, where they could talk without the curious eyes of Promise Creek upon them. Isaac was careful with her heart, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. Their courtship, if that's what it was, remained largely proper, a kiss on the cheek at the end of each visit, an occasional brief touch of hands. Yet Lily felt herself falling deeper with each meeting, drawn not just to Isaac's obvious strength and kindness, but to the quiet depth she discovered beneath his straightforward manner. He was a man who read poetry by lamplight in his cabin, who could name every star in the Wyoming sky, who spoke of his land not as a possession, but as a partnership. He told her of his dreams for the ranch, not to build an empire, but to create something lasting and good that might someday pass to a family of his own. On a particularly cold day in mid-November, Lily was working on the wedding dress for the blacksmith's daughter when Sarah burst into her room without knocking, her face tight with worry. "Weather's turning," she announced. "Sheriff's just been round to warn everyone. Big storm coming in from the north, likely to hit by nightfall." Lily set aside her sewing. "How bad?" "Bad enough that he's telling folks to stock up on supplies and stay indoors until it passes." Sarah twisted her hands anxiously. "I'm worried about Isaac and Jake. They were planning to bring the last of the herd down from the high pasture today." "Surely they've heard the warnings?" Lily asked, her own concern rising to match Sarah's. "Ranch is isolated if no one's ridden out there specifically." Sarah shook her head. "I'm sure they'll be fine. Isaac knows these mountains and their moods better than most." But her voice lacked conviction. Lily stood, decision made. "I'll go into town with you to get supplies. Then perhaps we can find someone who might have news of the ranch." The main street of Promise Creek was bustling with activity as townsfolk hurried to prepare for the coming storm. Dark clouds were already visible on the northern horizon, and the wind carried a bitter chill that cut through Lily's woolen cloak. As they left the general store, arms laden with provisions, a rider came thundering down the street, his horse lathered despite the cold. He pulled up sharply in front of the sheriff's office, and Lily recognized one of the hands from Isaac's ranch. "That's Matthew Wilson," Sarah said, hastening toward the man as he dismounted. "Matt, what news?" The cowboy turned, his young face grim beneath his hat. "Miss Sarah, Isaac sent me to town to warn the sheriff about the storm. It's looking mighty fierce up north." "Where is my brother?" Sarah demanded. "He and Jake are bringing down the last of the herd from Blacktail Ridge," Matt explained. "Should be at the ranch by now if all went well." "If," Lily couldn't stop herself from asking. Matt glanced at her, recognition dawning. "You must be Miss O'Brien. Isaac's mentioned you." He touched the brim of his hat in greeting before continuing. "The cattle were skittish with the weather changing. Makes them harder to drive. But Isaac and Jake know what they're doing. They'll be fine." Despite his reassuring words, Lily couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The clouds were moving faster now, the wind strengthening by the minute. "I should get back," Matt said, eyeing the sky. "Isaac will have my hide if I'm caught in town during the storm when there's work to be done at the ranch." "Tell him we're thinking of him," Sarah said. "And to be careful, for heaven's sake." Matt nodded, remounted his horse and rode out of town at a gallop, clearly racing against the approaching storm. The first snowflakes began to fall as Lily and Sarah hurried back to the boarding house. By the time they'd stored the supplies and secured the shutters, a full blizzard was raging outside, the wind howling around the corners of the building and driving snow against the windows with such force that it sounded like sand being thrown. Lily found herself stationed at the window of her room, peering out into the swirling whiteness, despite knowing she couldn't possibly see anything useful. The other boarders gathered in the parlor downstairs, finding comfort in company, but Lily preferred the solitude of her room where she didn't have to hide her growing anxiety. Night fell early, the storm showing no signs of abating. Sarah brought a tray of food to Lily's room, but neither woman had much appetite. "He's been through worse," Sarah said, trying to sound confident. The blizzard of '68 was far worse than this, and Isaac was caught right in the middle of it. Came through without a scratch. Lily nodded, grateful for the attempt at reassurance even if it didn't ease her fears. He's experienced. He knows what to do in such conditions. Exactly, Sarah agreed. And he's not alone. Jake's with him, and those two have always looked out for each other. The night stretched endlessly, the storm's fury unrelenting. Lily tried to sleep, but found herself returning to the window again and again, as if her vigilance might somehow protect the Turner brothers from the elements. She thought of Isaac out in the cold and darkness, possibly struggling to find shelter, and her heart ached with a depth of feeling that surprised her. When had this man become so important to her? When had his safety become so entwined with her own happiness? Sometime in the early hours of the morning, exhaustion finally claimed her, and Lily fell into a fitful sleep in the chair by the window. She dreamed of Isaac lost in swirling snow, calling her name as she searched desperately for him. She woke with a start to find pale daylight filtering through frost-covered glass. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie stillness and a world transformed by snow. Promise Creek lay buried under at least 2 feet of white, with drifts much deeper against buildings and fences. A knock at her door revealed Sarah, her face drawn from a similarly sleepless night. "Sheriff's organizing a search party," she said without preamble. "Several people are unaccounted for, including Isaac and Jake. They never made it back to the ranch." Lily's blood turned cold. "How do they know?" "2 of Isaac's hands rode in at first light. Said the brothers went up to Blacktail Ridge yesterday morning to bring down the last of the cattle and never returned." Sarah's voice trembled slightly. "The men waited as long as they dared, then sought shelter at the ranch house when the storm hit." Lily was already reaching for her cloak. "I'm coming with you." "Lily, it's dangerous out there. I don't care," Lily interrupted, a fierceness in her voice that surprised them both. "I can't just sit here waiting for news. I'll go mad." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I understand, but you'll need more than that thin cloak. Come with me." Within the hour, Lily found herself bundled in borrowed clothing, riding in a sleigh alongside Sarah and the town doctor toward the Turner Ranch. The search party, consisting of the sheriff, several townsmen, and the remaining hands from Isaac's ranch, rode ahead on horseback, breaking a trail through the deep snow. The ranch was a substantial operation. Lily noted, despite her worry, a large main house built of logs, several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn big enough to shelter dozens of animals. Under different circumstances, she would have been eager to see the place Isaac had spoken of with such pride. Now, she barely registered her surroundings as she followed Sarah into the house. "The men have split into groups," the sheriff explained once everyone was gathered in the warm kitchen. "They know these mountains and the likely shelters. If Isaac and Jake found refuge somewhere, we'll find them." "And if they didn't?" someone asked, voicing the fear everyone shared. The sheriff's expression was grim. "Let's not borrow trouble. Turner's a smart man. He wouldn't have tried to ride through that storm without shelter." The waiting was excruciating. Lily tried to make herself useful, helping prepare food for the searchers and assisting the doctor in organizing his supplies in case they were needed. But every time hoofbeats approached the house, she found herself rushing to the window, hope rising painfully in her chest only to crash down again when it wasn't Isaac. The short winter day was drawing to a close when a shout went up from outside. Lily and Sarah ran to the porch to see riders approaching, 3 men on horseback, with 2 figures slumped in front of them. "They found them," someone cried. The next minutes passed in a blur of activity. Isaac and Jake were carried into the house, both men unconscious and alarmingly pale with cold. The doctor immediately took charge, directing them to be placed near the fire and issuing rapid instructions for warming blankets and hot water. Lily stood frozen, staring at Isaac's still form as the doctor cut away his ice-encrusted clothing. His face was ashen, his lips tinged with blue, a deep gash on his forehead crusted with frozen blood. "What happened?" Sarah asked one of the searchers, her voice shaking. "Found them in a line shack up on Eagle Point," the man replied. "Looks like they got caught in the storm and tried to make for shelter. Isaac's horse must have fallen, the animal's leg was broken, had to put it down. Jake wouldn't leave his brother, tried to get them both to safety on one horse." He shook his head admiringly. "Nearly made it too. They were less than a quarter-mile from the shack when Jake's horse couldn't go on. They continued on foot somehow." "Will they be all right?" Lily managed to ask the doctor, finding her voice at last. The older man glanced up from where he was examining Isaac. "Too soon to tell. They're suffering from severe exposure and Isaac has a concussion from the fall. The next few hours will be critical." Lily nodded numbly, then straightened her shoulders. "What can I do to help?" "We need to get them warm, but gradually," the doctor instructed. "Too much heat too quickly could shock their systems. Keep the blankets coming and prepare warm broth for when they wake." "When not if," Sarah murmured, and Lily clung to that distinction like a lifeline. The night that followed was the longest of Lily's life. She and Sarah took turns sitting with the brothers, monitoring their breathing, spooning broth between their lips when they showed signs of consciousness, and changing the warm compresses as directed by the doctor. Isaac stirred shortly after midnight, his eyes fluttering open briefly before closing again. Lily, who had been wiping his face with a warm cloth, froze as his blue eyes focused on her for a brief moment. "Lily," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I'm here," she whispered, taking his cold hand between her warm ones. "You're safe now. Rest." He seemed to relax at her words, slipping back into unconsciousness, but his breathing seemed stronger afterward, more purposeful. The doctor, checking on him an hour later, nodded in cautious approval. "His color's improving," he noted, "and his pulse is stronger. Keep doing what you're doing." By dawn, both men were showing clear signs of improvement. Jake had regained consciousness for longer periods, though he remained weak and confused. Isaac drifted in and out of awareness, each time seeming more lucid than the last. It was mid-morning when Isaac finally awoke fully, his eyes clearing as they focused on Lily's face beside him. "Am I dreaming?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lily shook her head, tears of relief springing to her eyes. "No, you're at your ranch. You were caught in the storm." Memory visibly returned to him. Is Jake all right?" "He's going to be fine," Lily assured him. "He's in the next room with Sarah. You both had a close call." Isaac closed his eyes briefly, exhaling shakily. "Thought we weren't going to make it. Storm came on faster than I've ever seen." He opened his eyes again, reaching for her hand. "But you're really here, at my ranch." "Of course I am," Lily said, squeezing his fingers gently. "Where else would I be when you needed me?" A smile tugged at his cracked lips. "Knew I'd find a good reason to bring you out here eventually, though I'd planned something more impressive than nearly freezing to death." Lily laughed, despite the tears that spilled down her cheeks. "I think you've been impressive enough for one day, Isaac Turner." His expression sobered as he studied her face. "You've been crying." "I was worried," Lily admitted, seeing no point in hiding the depth of her feelings anymore. "When they brought you in yesterday, you looked so still. I was afraid I might lose you before I'd even properly had you." The words hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. But Isaac's answering smile was worth any embarrassment. "Lily O'Brien," he said softly, "if you think a little Wyoming blizzard is enough to keep me from coming back to you, you don't know me very well yet." "Then I look forward to knowing you better," she replied, her heart so full it felt it might burst. Isaac's hand tightened around hers. "So do I, Lily. So do I." Chapter 7. Recovery and Revelations. The next week passed in a blur of activity at the Turner Ranch. Despite the doctor's insistence that Isaac and Jake remain bedridden for at least 3 days, both men proved to be terrible patients, constantly trying to get up to check on ranch operations and driving their caretakers to distraction. "If you don't stay in that bed, Isaac Turner, I swear I'll tie you to it," Lily threatened on the second day, when she caught him attempting to pull on his boots. Isaac looked up, a mixture of surprise and amusement crossing his features. "Why, Miss O'Brien, I do believe that's the most forceful I've ever heard you speak." Lily planted her hands on her hips, unmoved by his charm. "And you'll hear much worse if you don't follow the doctor's orders. You had a concussion and nearly froze to death. The ranch won't fall apart if you rest for a few days." With a sigh, Isaac relented, allowing Lily to help him back into bed. "It's not just the ranch," he admitted as she tucked the blankets around him. "I don't like feeling useless, and I don't like seeing others doing my work." "It's called accepting help," Lily said gently, "something I've had to learn myself recently." Isaac caught her hand as she smoothed the blanket. "You're right, as usual." His blue eyes, still shadowed with fatigue but clearer than they had been, held hers. "Thank you, Lily. Not just for the nursing, but for being here." "Where else would I be?" she asked simply. The tenderness in his expression made her heart skip. For a moment she thought he might pull her closer, but a knock at the door interrupted the moment. "Lunch is ready," Sarah announced, entering with a tray. She glanced between them, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Am I interrupting?" "Yes," Isaac grumbled. "No," Lily said simultaneously, feeling heat rise to her cheeks as she stepped away from the bed. Sarah's smile widened. "Well, I'll just leave this here then. Lily, when you're finished blushing, your own lunch is waiting in the kitchen." After Sarah departed, Isaac laughed softly. "My sister always did have terrible timing." "On the contrary," Lily replied, regaining her composure. "I think her timing was impeccable. You need to rest, not what?" Isaac asked innocently, though his eyes held a mischievous glint. "Not distract yourself from recovery," Lily finished primly, though her own lips twitched with suppressed laughter. "Now eat your lunch before it gets cold." As the days passed and the brothers' health improved, Lily found herself settling into life at the Turner Ranch with surprising ease. She helped Sarah with the cooking and household tasks, mended clothing damaged during the brothers' ordeal, and spent hours sitting with Isaac, reading to him from the books in his well-stocked library or simply talking. She learned more about the ranch, how Isaac and Jake had built it from the modest holding their father had established, expanding it year by year until it was now one of the most successful operations in the territory. She came to understand Isaac's deep connection to the land, how it was more than just livelihood to him but a legacy and a way of life he cherished. In turn, Isaac seemed eager to know everything about her childhood in Boston, her parents, her dreams and disappointments. He listened with genuine interest to stories she'd never shared with anyone, asking thoughtful questions that showed how carefully he attended to her words. "Why did you agree to become a mail-order bride?" he asked one evening as they sat in the ranch house parlor, the first time either of them had directly addressed the circumstances that had brought her to Promise Creek. "It seems a desperate measure for someone like you." Lily considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. "I suppose it was desperate in a way. After my parents died, I had few options. The seamstress work provided enough to live on, but just barely. The boarding house where I lived was decent but lonely. I had no family, no prospects of marriage." She paused, remembering the gray sameness of her days in Boston. When I saw Mr. Bosworth's advertisement, it seemed like Providence offering a new beginning, a chance to be useful, to build a life that meant something. And now, Isaac asked quietly, do you regret coming west? Lily met his gaze steadily. How could I possibly regret it? If I hadn't come to Promise Creek, if Mr. Bosworth hadn't rejected me, I would never have met you. The smile that spread across Isaac's face was like sunrise. I find myself in the peculiar position of being grateful to Franklin Bosworth, he admitted. Though I still think the man's a fool. A fortunate fool, Lily corrected. His poor judgment gave me something far better than I ever expected to find. Isaac reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. Lily, he began, his voice suddenly serious. I know it hasn't been long. The door burst open as Jake entered, halting abruptly when he saw their joined hands. Sorry, he said, not looking sorry at all. Didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know the men have finished mending the north pasture fence. Isaac's expression was a comical mixture of exasperation and resignation. Thank you, Jake. Anything else pressing that couldn't wait 5 minutes? Jake grinned unrepentantly. Nope, that about covers it. Carry on. He backed out of the room, closing the door with exaggerated care. I'm beginning to think my family is conspiring against me, Isaac muttered. Lily laughed. Perhaps they're trying to ensure you don't rush into things while still recovering from your ordeal. Rush? Isaac shook his head. Lily, I've known since that first day in the rain that you were someone special. The time since has only confirmed it. The raw honesty in his voice stole Lily's breath. Isaac, no, let me finish, he insisted gently. I'm not proposing, not yet. That would be rushing, and you deserve better than that. But I want you to know that my intentions are serious. When the time is right, if you'll have me, I intend to ask you to be my wife. Lily's heart soared at his words, even as a small part of her whispered cautions. You should know, she said carefully, that I'm not the sort of woman who inspires poetry or grand passions. Mr. Bosworth made that quite clear. Bosworth wouldn't know a treasure if it fell into his lap, Isaac said firmly, but I do. You're beautiful, Lily O'Brien, not just your face, though I find it lovely, but your heart, your strength. The way you face life's hardships without bitterness, the kindness you show to everyone you meet. His hand tightened around hers. I see you, Lily, all of you. And what I see is exactly what I want. Tears pricked at Lily's eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so intense it was almost painful. I see you too, Isaac Turner, she whispered. And I can think of no greater happiness than to build a life with you when the time is right. The look that passed between them held more meaning than any kiss could have conveyed. A promise, an understanding, a foundation upon which to build their future. The moment was broken by Sarah calling them to dinner, but the connection established in that quiet exchange remained, strengthening with each passing day as Lily continued her stay at the ranch. By the end of the week, both brothers were well on the road to recovery, and the doctor declared it safe for them to resume light duties. The weather had cleared, the roads were passable again, and there was no medical reason for Lily to remain at the ranch. I should return to town, she said reluctantly as she and Sarah washed dishes after breakfast. I have orders waiting, and I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Sarah snorted inelegantly. Imposed? Lily, you've been a godsend. I don't know how I would have managed without you this past week. Still, Lily persisted, people will talk if I stay longer without. She trailed off, her cheeks warming. Without a ring on your finger, Sarah finished for her, eyes twinkling. I suppose you're right, though it pains me to admit it. This territory may be wilder than Boston, but folks still notice when an unmarried woman stays at a bachelor's ranch for too long. The decision to return to Promise Creek, while prudent, left Lily with a profound sense of loss. She'd grown accustomed to the rhythm of life at the ranch, to waking each morning knowing Isaac was nearby, to their long conversations by the fire each evening. Going back to her small room at the boarding house seemed suddenly bleak in comparison. Isaac, too, seemed troubled by her impending departure. After lunch, he suggested a short walk, the first he'd been allowed outside since the blizzard. They strolled slowly around the ranch yard, Isaac's strength still not fully returned but improving daily. "I wish you didn't have to go," he said as they paused to look out over the snow-covered pastures. "So do I," Lily admitted, "but it's the proper thing to do." Isaac nodded, understanding if not happy about it. "I'll be in town often," he promised. "And perhaps when the weather allows you might visit again. With Sarah as chaperone, of course," he added with a slight smile. "I'd like that," Lily said. "Very much." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, shoulders nearly touching, breath fogging in the cold air. Then Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I have something for you," he said, suddenly seeming almost shy. "A gift to remember our time here." Lily accepted the package, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a delicate silver brooch in the shape of a wildflower. "Isaac, it's beautiful," she breathed, running a finger over the intricate petals. "It was my mother's," he explained. "She always said it reminded her of the first wildflowers of spring, how they're strong enough to push through the snow, bringing beauty after the long winter." The significance of the gift wasn't lost on Lily. This wasn't a trinket purchased on impulse but a family heirloom, something precious and meaningful. "Are you certain you want me to have this?" "I've never been more certain of anything," Isaac replied, his voice warm with affection. "It belongs with someone who embodies its meaning." Lily was touched beyond words. She carefully pinned the brooch to her dress where it caught the winter sunlight, silver petals gleaming. "I'll treasure it always," she promised. When the time came for Lily to depart, Isaac insisted on driving her back to town himself, despite Jake's protests that he wasn't yet strong enough for the journey. The ride passed too quickly, both of them acutely aware of the approaching separation, small though it would be. At the boarding house, Isaac helped Lily from the wagon, holding her hands a moment longer than necessary. "This isn't goodbye," he said firmly. "Just farewell for now." "For now," Lily agreed, mustering a smile despite the lump in her throat. Isaac glanced around, noted the empty street, and quickly leaned down to press a kiss not to her cheek as had become their custom, but to her lips, brief but unmistakably tender. "I'll see you soon, Lily O'Brien," he murmured. Watching him drive away, Lily touched her fingers to her lips, still feeling the gentle pressure of his kiss. Despite the physical distance being restored between them, she felt closer to Isaac than ever before. Whatever the future held, she knew with certainty that their paths were now irrevocably entwined. Chapter 8. Christmas preparations. December arrived with a fresh blanket of snow and a flurry of activity in Promise Creek as the town prepared for the Christmas season. Lily found herself busier than ever with holiday commissions, new dresses for Christmas services, gifts of shirts and scarves, and special clothes for the children's Christmas pageant at the church. She welcomed the work, not just for the income it provided, but for the distraction from Isaac's absence. True to his word, he came to town as often as his duties allowed, but the harsh Wyoming winter and the demands of the ranch limited his visits to once a week at most. Each visit was precious to Lily, whether they shared a meal at the cafe, attended church together, or simply walked through town, their breath clouding in the cold air as they talked. Their growing attachment hadn't gone unnoticed in the small community. Lily was aware of the speculative glances and whispered conversations that sometimes followed them, but found she didn't mind. Let them talk, she thought. What was between her and Isaac was too genuine, too precious to be tarnished by gossip. Even Franklin Bosworth seemed to have accepted the situation, though his initial reaction to seeing Lily and Isaac together had been less than gracious. He'd taken to nodding stiffly when they passed in the street, his expression suggesting he'd bitten into something sour. "He's realized what he lost," Sarah commented one evening as she helped Lily organize fabric for a new batch of orders. "Though his pride won't let him admit it." "I'm grateful to him, in a way," Lily mused, smoothing a length of dark green wool. "If he'd been kinder that first day, I might never have known Isaac," Sarah smiled. "Everything happens for a reason, as my mother used to say." 2 weeks before Christmas, Isaac arrived in town with an invitation that set Lily's heart racing. "We're having a Christmas Eve gathering at the ranch," he explained as they sat in the boarding house parlor, the only place they could speak privately during the cold weather. "Nothing elaborate, just a dinner with family and a few close friends. I'd be honored if you'd join us." "I'd love to," Lily replied without hesitation. "Good." Isaac's smile was radiant. "Sarah will be there, of course, and Jake, and a few of the hands who don't have family nearby. I thought perhaps you might stay over." He paused, suddenly flustered. "That is, Sarah will stay as well, for propriety's sake. You could travel together." Lily fought to keep her expression serene despite the excitement bubbling within her. "That sounds lovely, Isaac. Thank you for thinking of me." His expression turned serious. "I think of little else these days, Lily." The simple confession, delivered in his straightforward manner, warmed her more than any flowery declaration could have. "I think of you too," she admitted softly. "More than I probably should." Isaac reached for her hand, his large fingers enveloping hers. "I've been thinking," he began, then hesitated. "A dangerous pastime," Lily teased gently, trying to ease the sudden tension. His lips quirked in response. "So it is, but necessary nonetheless." He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about timing and what's proper and what people might say." Lily's heart began to pound, though she kept her voice steady. "And what conclusions have you reached?" "That life's too short to worry over much about such things," Isaac replied, his blue eyes intent on hers. "The blizzard taught me that, if nothing else. I nearly died out there, Lily. And my only real regret was the thought that I might never see you again, never get the chance to tell you what you've come to mean to me." "Isaac," Lily whispered, unable to say more past the emotion clogging her throat. "I'm not proposing right this minute," he clarified quickly. "That should be done properly, not rushed through in a boarding house parlor with Sarah likely listening at the door." A muffled sound of indignation from the hallway confirmed his suspicion, making them both stifle laughter. "What I'm trying to say," Isaac continued, lowering his voice, "is that I intend to ask you a very important question on Christmas Eve, if you're amenable. And I wanted to give you fair warning so it doesn't come as a complete surprise." Joy bloomed in Lily's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "I appreciate the warning," she managed to say, though her voice trembled. "And yes, I'm quite amenable to being asked questions on Christmas Eve." The smile that spread across Isaac's face could have lit the darkest night. "Well then," he said, bringing her hand to his lips for a brief, warm kiss. "I look forward to our celebration even more now." After Isaac left, Lily sat for a long while in the parlor, her thoughts whirling with possibilities. Isaac intended to propose to ask her to be his wife, to share his life and his ranch, to build a future together. It was everything she'd secretly hoped for since that day in the rain when he'd found her crying at the stagecoach depot, yet so much more than she'd ever expected. Sarah found her there, still smiling dreamily at nothing in particular. "I gather from your expression that my brother finally found his courage," she asked, sitting beside Lily on the settee. "He did," Lily confirmed, "though the actual question is being saved for Christmas Eve." Sarah clapped her hands in delight. "I knew it. Oh, Lily, I couldn't be happier. You're exactly what Isaac needs, what we all need, to be honest. The ranch hasn't felt like a real home since Mary died, but with you there—" She trailed off, her eyes suddenly damp. "It will be a home again." Touched by Sarah's words, Lily impulsively hugged the older woman. "Thank you. Your acceptance means more to me than I can say." "Acceptance? Lily, I've been plotting to make you my sister-in-law since the day Isaac brought you to my doorstep," Sarah admitted with a laugh. I recognized that look in his eyes immediately, like a man who's been wandering in the wilderness and suddenly glimpses the promised land. "Sarah," Lily protested, blushing at the dramatic comparison. "It's true," Sarah insisted. "And now we have preparations to make. A Christmas Eve celebration. Indeed, it will be perfect." The days leading up to Christmas passed in a whirlwind of activity. Lily finished her commissioned work and then turned her attention to personal projects: a new shirt for Isaac, embroidered handkerchiefs for Sarah, and a warm scarf for Jake, all created in stolen moments between other tasks. She also worked on a dress for herself, the finest she'd ever made, using the dark green wool she'd been saving for a special occasion. She crafted a gown with a fitted bodice, full skirt, and delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. It was simple compared to the fashionable dresses she'd seen in Boston magazines, but the rich color complemented her hazel eyes and brown hair, and the style suited her tall, slender frame. When she tried it on the night before Christmas Eve, Sarah gasped in appreciation. "Oh, Lily, it's perfect. Isaac won't be able to take his eyes off you." Lily smoothed the skirt, admiring the way the fabric caught the lamplight. "Do you really think he'll like it? He'll be struck dumb," Sarah predicted with a grin, "which might make proposing difficult, but I'm sure he'll recover in time." The morning of Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold. The world outside the boarding house windows a glittering expanse of white under a flawless blue sky. Lily woke early, too excited to sleep, and spent extra time on her appearance, arranging her hair in a more elaborate style than usual and pinning Isaac's silver wildflower brooch to her traveling dress. Sarah had arranged for a sleigh to take them to the ranch, complete with jingling bells and warm blankets to ward off the cold. As they glided through the snow-covered landscape, Lily found herself filled with a sense of rightness, of coming home rather than leaving it behind. The ranch looked like something from a Christmas card, the buildings outlined in snow, smoke curling invitingly from the main house chimney. As the sleigh approached, the front door opened, and Isaac stepped onto the porch, his tall figure silhouetted against the warm light from within. He helped first his sister and then Lily from the sleigh, his hands lingering on Lily's waist perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Welcome," he said, his smile warming her more effectively than any fire could have. "Merry Christmas, Isaac," she replied, returning his smile with one of her own. The ranch house had been transformed for the occasion. Evergreen boughs decorated the mantels and doorways, their fresh scent filling the air. Candles glowed on every surface, and a Christmas tree stood in the corner of the parlor, adorned with simple ornaments and small candles that would be lit after dinner. Jake greeted them enthusiastically, his usual good humor amplified by the holiday spirit. Several of the ranch hands were already present, dressed in their Sunday best, their usual rough manners somewhat subdued by the occasion. The afternoon passed pleasantly with conversation, and Christmas carols played on the piano by one of the hands who had revealed an unexpected talent for music. Dinner was a festive affair: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the root cellar, followed by mince pies and a Christmas pudding that Sarah had prepared. Throughout it all, Lily was acutely aware of Isaac's presence. The way his eyes sought hers across the table, the brief touches of his hand against hers when passing dishes. There was an anticipation building between them, a shared secret that made every glance, every smile seem laden with meaning. After dinner, the group gathered in the parlor where Jake and one of the hands carefully lit the candles on the Christmas tree. In the soft glow, they exchanged gifts, simple, thoughtful tokens that reflected the genuine affection connecting the people in the room. Isaac's reaction to the shirt Lily had made him was everything she could have hoped for. "This is remarkable," he said, running his fingers over the fine stitching. "I've never owned anything so well made." "I'm glad you like it," Lily replied, touched by his appreciation of her work. "Like it? I'll be the best-dressed rancher in the territory," Isaac declared, making everyone laugh. He presented Lily with a small, carefully wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound copy of Tennyson's poems, the pages edged in gold. "I remembered you saying he was your favorite," Isaac explained as Lily reverently opened the book. "It's beautiful," she said, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Thank you, Isaac." As the evening progressed, the hands gradually took their leave, returning to the bunkhouse with cheerful good nights and thanks for the celebration. Jake made a show of being tired and suggested that Sarah might like to see the improvements he'd made to the guest rooms, practically dragging his protesting sister from the parlor. And then, suddenly, Lily and Isaac were alone, the room quiet except for the crackling of the fire and the soft hiss of the candles on the tree. "They are about as subtle as a stampeding herd," Isaac remarked dryly, nodding toward the door through which his siblings had disappeared. Lily laughed. "They mean well." "They do," Isaac agreed. He moved to sit beside her on the settee, taking her hands in his. "Lily, I had a whole speech prepared for this moment. I've been practicing it for days." "And now?" Lily asked, her heart racing. "Now I find I can't remember a word of it," he admitted with a rueful smile. "All I can think about is how beautiful you look in the candlelight and how much I want to build a life with you." He slid from the settee to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "I'm not a poet or a scholar, Lily. I'm just a man who's been given a second chance at happiness, and I don't intend to waste it. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your quiet dignity. I love the way you see beauty in simple things, the way you've embraced this hard land without complaint, the way you make everyone around you feel valued." Tears of joy welled in Lily's eyes as Isaac reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "Lillian O'Brien, would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife?" he asked, opening the box to reveal a ring, a simple gold band set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the candlelight and scattered it like stars. "Yes," Lily whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Isaac, with all my heart." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to sit beside her again, drawing her into his arms. "I promise to spend every day making sure you never regret that answer," he said softly, before lowering his lips to hers. The kiss was tender at first, a gentle sealing of their promise, but quickly deepened into something more, a shared passion that spoke of the future they would build together. When they finally parted, both were breathless, Lily's cheeks flushed and Isaac's eyes dark with emotion. "I love you, Isaac Turner," Lily said, needing to speak the words that had been in her heart for weeks. "And I love you, soon to be Mrs. Turner," he replied, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a gentle hand. From the doorway came the sound of quiet applause. They turned to find Sarah and Jake watching them, matching expressions of satisfaction on their faces. "About time," Jake declared. "I was beginning to think he'd lose his nerve." "Never," Isaac said, keeping one arm firmly around Lily's waist. "Some things are worth any amount of courage." As their siblings rushed forward with congratulations and embraces, Lily felt a profound sense of belonging wash over her. 6 weeks ago, she had stood in the rain, rejected and alone, believing herself unwanted and unlovely. Now she was surrounded by people who valued her, accepted by a man who saw her true worth, poised to begin a life she had never dared to dream possible. It wasn't the future she'd imagined when she'd boarded that stagecoach in Boston, but it was infinitely better, richer, truer, filled with genuine love rather than practical arrangement. As Isaac squeezed her hand, his blue eyes full of promise, Lily knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just a husband, but a home. Chapter 9. New Year, New Beginnings. The news of Isaac and Lily's engagement spread through Promise Creek with the speed that only small-town gossip can achieve. By the time they attended Christmas Day services together, Lily's ring gleaming on her finger, it seemed everyone in town already knew and had an opinion on the matter. Most reactions were positive, genuine congratulations from people who had come to know and respect both Isaac and Lily. A few raised eyebrows at the relatively short courtship were easily dismissed. Frontier life often accelerated relationships that might have progressed more slowly in eastern cities. Franklin Bosworth's reaction, when they encountered him outside the church, was predictably sour. "Well, Turner," he said with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, "it seems congratulations are in order, though one might question the wisdom of such a hasty arrangement." Before Isaac could respond, Lily spoke up, her voice clear and steady. "Sometimes, Mr. Bosworth, the heart recognizes what it wants with perfect clarity. I consider myself fortunate to have found a man who values substance over appearance, character over convention." Bosworth flushed, clearly understanding the implicit criticism in her words. "Indeed," he managed to say. "Well, I wish you both happiness." With a stiff nod, he walked away. "That was diplomatically handled," Isaac murmured, admiration evident in his voice. Lily smiled. "I've learned that the best response to discourtesy is often simple dignity." "You continue to surprise me, Lily O'Brien," Isaac said, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "I look forward to a lifetime of such surprises." The couple agreed on a February wedding, giving them time to prepare while not delaying unnecessarily. "I don't need anything elaborate," Lily assured Isaac when he asked about her preferences. "Just our family and friends in the church where we'll build our life together." "Whatever you want," Isaac promised, "though I'd marry you tomorrow in a snowdrift if that was your wish." The first weeks of their engagement passed in a pleasant blur of planning and preparation. Lily continued her sewing business, though now she worked on her own wedding dress in addition to commissions. As winter began to wane, the excitement in Promise Creek grew, with townsfolk eager to celebrate the union of two beloved residents. While the days were filled with work, the evenings were often spent in Isaac's company, strengthening their bond while preparing for the life they would soon share. Each moment together filled Lily with anticipation for the future, knowing that love and understanding would guide them in their new beginning.